All right, we're going to continue our study of the life of Moses, the book of Exodus, the biblical Moses that Hollywood forgot. Previously, in the book of Exodus, the biblical Moses that Hollywood forgot, we saw Moses deliver not the tablets, but we actually heard the voice of God speaking directly to the Jewish people. The voice of God speaking those commandments. 10, not 15 of them, but 10 of them. And they don't have the tablets yet. All they've heard is the thunder of the voice of God from Sinai speaking the very words of the covenant. And we'll pick up from there. Verse 18. All the people, this is after the 10th commandment is recited. God's done. All the people perceived the thunder and the lightning flashes and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they trembled and stood at a distance. So we were in narrative. We broke for the voice of God delivering the 10 words, the Decalogue, the 10 commandments. And then we're back to the narrative. And as the text returns, we see the terrified reaction of the Israelites to God's pyrotechnic display. What did they get? Lightning flashes and thunder and shofar blowing and the mountain smoking. Now, that's not the top of the mountain alone. That's the whole mountain enveloped in this pyrotechnic display. So we think back now to all of the warnings. How many warnings did God give the people through Moses? Not to touch the mountain, to approach near, but not too near. How many did he give? 3. Okay, 3. Now I think we see, after hearing the voice of God, no danger that the Hebrews are going to touch the mountain. In fact, the text tells us that they ran in the opposite direction. They stood at a distance. Remember that the same word for the mountain shaking, the mountain quaking, is the word that's translated for the people trembling. So that's, again, I think it's a very mild translation for that same word. The mountain is not just trembling, it's shaking, it's quaking, and the people are shaking just like that. This is intense. It is awesome. And it's also quite frightening. And we can see from this text that the people have had enough of this novelty, of this direct access to Jehovah. And they are fearful for their lives. How do I know it? Because they're quaking. They're standing at a distance. And watch what they say in verse 19. And watch what they say in verse 19. There we go. Which ones of you were in class with me this morning? Okay, right? This is yes. I'm grabbing the next, I'm pausing for effect. Then they said to Moses, who? The Israelites. They said to Moses from a distance, remember? This is what they say. Speak to us yourself, and we will listen. But let not God speak to us, or we will die. Right? Let not God speak to us, or we will die. This system that they had in place of Moses, and this is why Moses ascends the mountain 3 times in chapter 19 and descends 3 times, because it's a game of telephone. Moses is the intercessor, is the intermediary between God and the people. This is the one time that we see God directly communicating with his people. No intermediary, no intercessor before them, and the Jewish people with one voice say, Dayenu. It is enough. No more of this direct access. We're fearful for our lives, and we would like very much to return to the previous system of Moses serving as our divine intercessor, as our divine intermediary. Now, that's an interesting thing, because Jewish people today, they will tell you that one of the things that sets Judaism as a religious system apart from Christianity is that we don't need, Jewish people don't need an intercessor to stand between them and God. They don't need a priest, and they certainly don't need a Jesus or a Messiah to stand between them and God. Jewish people, at least according to the rabbis, teach that every Jewish person has direct access to God. That's simply not what the text of Torah is teaching. Quite the opposite. God gave them direct access, and the Jewish people said, thanks, but no thanks. We'll go back to the intermediary system. Moses is the intercessor between the people and God. When Moses ceased to be the intercessor, he passed off the responsibility to the high priest, initially his brother Aaron, and then initially after that his nephew, and then on for generations. The Jewish people, according to the Bible, have always had, have always needed, and indeed have always preferred to have an intercessor stand between them and God, because direct access to God was simply too intense. So if somebody thinks they have direct access to God today without the benefit of an intermediary, they may think, or an intercessor standing between them, they may think they have direct access to God, but it doesn't jive with the text. Sorry to say, sorry to burst the religious, rabbinical illusions of the past 1900 years, but Judaism doesn't provide the intercessor, the intercession, that the Torah itself seems to indicate that the Jewish people need. Of course, if they were to ask me, well, how do we fix that? Is there a solution? I would say, yeah, and it's not one that I made up. It's actually one that God provided. And your intercessor, you've always had an intercessor available, an intermediary, a mediator between you and God available. His name is Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus, the Messiah, if you would simply put your trust in him. But let's not get to preaching, for goodness sake. Let not God, just let that sink in. Let not God speak to us, or we will die. The book of Deuteronomy describes this interaction with some greater detail than just one verse. Deuteronomy 5:22, these words the Lord spoke to all your assembly at the mountain from the midst of the fire, of the cloud, and the gloom with a great voice, and he added no more. 10 commandments, that's what he gave. He wrote them on 2 tablets of stone and gave them to me. And when you heard the voice from the midst of the darkness, while the mountain was burning with fire, you came near to me, well, all the heads of your tribes and your elders, the leadership, and of course the nation is always responsible for the actions of their leaders. Right? The leaders call the shots for the people. That's true in the Bible. It's true with every nation that's ever existed. A nation is held responsible for the actions, decisions of their leaders. Well, all the heads of the tribes, your elders, they all came to me, and they said, behold, which in plain English would have read more like, heads up, Moses. The Lord our God has shown us his glory and his greatness, and we have heard his voice from the midst of the fire, and we have seen today that God speaks with man, yet he lives. Why then should we die? Why should we push our luck any further? For this great fire of this direct contact with God will consume us. If we hear the voice of the covenant name of God, Jehovah our God, any longer, then we will die. Somehow we slip through and we're still alive. But if this continues as the norm, we can't take it. Our poor shattered nerves. For who is there of all flesh who has heard the voice of the living God speaking from the midst of the fire as we have and lived? Well, to which I would recommend they read Exodus 3 and 4 when Moses actually hears the voice of God from the fire of the burning bush and he lives. But nonetheless, this is the Jewish reaction. This is the Israelites' reaction. We don't like it. We don't want it. Go near, Moses, and you hear all that the Lord our God, Jehovah our God, says. Then you speak to us all that Jehovah our God speaks to you, and we will hear you through this game of telephone and do it. It's Deuteronomy. Moses said to the people, do not be afraid. Why does he say that to the people? Because they were afraid. Were you not paying attention to what you just read? They're trembling, they're quaking, they're shaking, they're so terrified they don't want direct access. Moses says, don't be afraid. Knock it off. For God has come in order to test you, and in order that the fear of him may remain with you. Well, mission accomplished there. So that you may not sin. Well, spoiler alert, it doesn't last very long. The fear of God as a prophylactic to the spiritual, holy lifestyles of the Israelites does not last very long. But I don't want to get ahead of ourselves in the text. But that was the idea. The fear of God may remain with you. Remember, the fear of God, the awe of God, and a little healthy dose of, a little taste of terror. Yeah, that's okay too. That should remain with you so that you may not sin. It's a gift. If you remember this moment, you will not want to fall into the hands of an angry God. In other words, Moses is trying to indicate to them, you wouldn't like him when he's angry, right? You have to watch out, right? So a holy dose, a healthy dose of holy shock and awe was a good thing, Moses says. So the people, again, stood at a distance, not getting too close to Sinai, while Moses approached the thick cloud where God was. So the narrative at this point breaks off, with Moses going once again to approach God at Sinai. The people have made it very clear. Moses is the intercessor, is the intermediary between us and God. Moses goes to the thick cloud. We then break the narrative for more law. and a set of laws and ordinances that God communicates to Moses, that Moses writes down and communicates to the people. We pick up the passage, oh, by the way, point of the intercessor. We have the intercessor, one God, one mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus. Now, we pick up the narrative again, as if the narrative hadn't broken, to deliver us, in a sense, a special message from the sponsor of laws and ordinances. And we pick up the narrative in chapter 23, verse 20, with a promise regarding the promised land, some instructions, some directions regarding the promised land. Because they're not there, remember, they're at Sinai, but they're headed to the promised land. Behold, God speaking to Moses. I am going to send an angel before you. For what? To guard you along the way and to bring you into the place that I have prepared. I will send you an angel. God has sent his angel, the special angel of God, the angel of the Lord. We have seen the angel of the Lord show up several times in the narrative thus far in Exodus. The angel of the Lord spoke from the burning bush to Moses, and Moses reveals in his response that the angel of the Lord is somehow God himself. We have seen the angel of the Lord lead the children of Israel in the cloud, the pillar of fire, the pillar of cloud, by day and by night, the Shekinah glory. This is an angel of the Lord, but also somehow God himself. And now, once again, we see another mention of the angel of the Lord. And when we see the angel of the Lord in the Hebrew Bible, it is generally a pre-incarnate manifestation of the second person of the Trinity or the triunity of God. God has a complex structure. It's far more complex than we can imagine. He is one God, three persons. And when the angel of the Lord appears, it is the second person. It is that portion of God, or that manifestation, if you will, of God that people see, that people can actually see. Now, this angel is going to guard them along the way, is going to protect Israel, and is going to bring them into the land, to deliver them to the place which I have prepared. Now, watch how you are to respond to this angel. Because this is why it's no question. This angel is not just any angel. This is God himself. Be on your guard before him and obey his voice. Do not be rebellious toward him. Don't disobey him, for he will not pardon your transgression, since my name is in him. Defiance of the angel will result in his refusal to forgive sin. Angels can't forgive sin. Only God can forgive sin. So if you disobey him, if you defy him, if you deny him, are rebellious toward him, he will not pardon your transgression. He will not forgive your sin. And because God's name is in him, it is very clear that this angel acts with an authority that belongs to God alone, only to God. He forgives sin. He possesses the covenant name of God, Jehovah. He is a visible manifestation of Jehovah. But if you truly obey his voice and do all that I say, So obey his voice and do all that I say. When the angel of God speaks, is it as if God is speaking himself? That's what the text is saying. Well, if you do this, then I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries. God will personally ensure the defeat of Israel's adversaries. Watch this breathtaking crescendo of I wills in these next few verses. I've highlighted them for you. Watch how many I wills, how many guarantees, how many promises, how many commitments God makes to his people. I will be, if conditional upon your behavior. Your enemies will be my enemies. Your adversaries, my adversaries. For my angel will go before you and bring you into the land of the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, the Mosquitobites, the Satellites, and I will completely destroy them. My angel will direct you into the promised land. Other people are living there. Don't be shaken. Don't be surprised. Other people were living there when I gave the land to your forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They're still there. Their descendants are there. But their sins have overflowed their cup. And I will go before you, if you're obedient to my angel, and I will completely destroy them. I will. Here's what you need to do, though, when this happens. You shall not worship their gods, nor serve them, nor do according to their deeds. Why would God give them a rule like this after the Jewish people as a nation experienced as a nation the breathtaking, overpowering pyrotechnic explosions of God's voice speaking from the mountain directly to them? Why would God assume that it would be necessary to warn the people not to be attracted to the other gods? You know, the ones that are represented by little teraphim and idols and poles and trees? God must know something that I, the reader, don't know. And that is the extraordinary propensity that not only Jewish people have, but all people have. It's common to humanity, of turning their backs on God. Even a God whom they know, whom they serve, whom they love, whom they fear. It's still very easy to lose sight and lose their moral and spiritual bearings to serve. So don't do it. Those people, the Amorites, the Canaanites, don't worship their gods. Don't worship them. Don't serve them. Don't do according to their deeds. Instead, what do you need to do? But you shall utterly overthrow them. Not just ignore them and tolerate them and can't we all get along, right? Diversity is our strength. Nonsense. You must utterly overthrow them and break their sacred pillars into pieces. Do you remember who God identified himself as? The beginning of the Ten Commandments. I am a jealous God. I will brook no rivals for my affection. I am a passionate God. What am I passionate about? Not a what. I'm passionate about a whom? Passionate about you. You must however, give me unwavering allegiance. If you give me unwavering allegiance, I will bless you. All those I wills. Here's some more. You will serve the Lord your God. And look at the blessings that will come. He will bless your food supplies, your bread, your water. I guarantee it, I will remove sickness from your midst. Remember, I am Jehovah, your healer. We saw just 3 chapters earlier. Well, 7 chapters earlier at this point. There shall be no one miscarrying or barren in your land. What kind of a guarantee? That's an extraordinary guarantee. A guarantee, fertility for all. I will fulfill the number of your days. I'm going to be the responsible party for blessing you and for expelling. You're not going to have to work up too terrible a sweat when it comes to expelling the people from the land, because I will do the heavy lifting. I will send my terror ahead of you, and I will throw into confusion all the people among whom you come. And I will make all your enemies turn their backs to you. They're not being rude. They're being cowardly. They're running. They're leaving. They are what you would say, perhaps the term would be self-deporting from the promised land. But watch how this is going to go. I will send hornets ahead of you. They will drive out the Hivites, the Canaanites, the Hittites before you. But here's how it's going to happen. I will not, it's the only time you see it, will not. I will not drive them out before you in a single year, that the land may not become desolate and the beasts of the field become too numerous for you. So when I drive them out, I will not be driving out the inhabitants out all at once. I won't even do it within a year. The inhabitants of Canaan will be driven out in gradual stages, little by little. And that will prevent the land's desolation and becoming overrun by wild animals. Right? As the Israelites' presence in the land increases, the Canaanites are going, and all the others, are going to proportionately decrease until, after a time, the Hebrews enjoy their entire geographic inheritance. Joshua, it tells us it's a 7-year-long campaign. And that actually is going to wipe out most, but not all, of the land's tenants. By the way, this is another reason why I don't necessarily hold to the numerous millions that some project into the Exodus account here. If we have well in excess of 2 million people, and we're worried about the land being overrun beyond the capability of the people to inhabit, I don't really think that I don't think that those facts would jibe. It's only if we're dealing with a limited number. And when I say limited, we're not talking millions, but we're talking hundreds of thousands, absolutely. Maybe 6, maybe 7, maybe even 1 million, but not 2.5 million. Again, because we have to have a situation where within the boundaries of the land, the beasts of the field become too numerous for you. But on the other hand, for those, to those who want to go with the higher number of population of children of Israel, wait till you see the actual borders. When we see the borders of what the promised land should have been, as promised here, specifically by the direction of God himself, you'll see what happens. I will drive them out for you little by little until you become fruitful and take possession of the land. Watch these boundaries. I will, verse 31, I will fix your boundary from the Red Sea to the Sea of the Philistines, and from the wilderness to the river Euphrates. And I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and you will drive them out before you. So the ultimate boundaries of the promised land are provided. Now, this is a really big regional map. Let me show you what show you first of all what we're looking at. This is Europe right here. Here we see the Greek islands, right? And we have Crete and Cyprus. And this is Asia Minor. And this is Asia. And this is Iraq and Iran. This is Arabia. This is Egypt. This is the Sinai Peninsula. So the actual borders of the Promised Land, put in perspective, in context, in world context, go from the Red Sea right here, the Gulf of Aqaba, okay, up over the Sinai Peninsula. Sinai Peninsula is not the Promised Land, or else when they got to the Sinai Peninsula, they said, we're here, right? So the Sinai Peninsula, not the Promised Land. So it goes from here all the way up the Mediterranean coast. This is the Gaza Strip here, all the way up to the Mediterranean coast. This is Lebanon here, okay? You see this white spot right here. It goes out into the desert right around here, Jordan. This is Jordan. And up here, Syria. And it actually encompasses, this is actually too small, this map, to show you the Promised Land. The borders of the land continue up the Mediterranean, up to the Euphrates. So this area. Now look where they are in proximity to the rest of the world. Africa, right here. Asia, right here. Europe, right here. They are at the center. Israel, the land of Israel, is at the center of the world. And they have never possessed the actual borders that God promises in this passage. They will, but only during the Messianic age, when God's promises will all be realized and fulfilled. Because right now, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria are in the way. You shall make no covenant with them, the people who are in the land, who you'll be dispossessing. Make no covenant, no contract, no treaties with them. Or with their gods. Absolutely with their gods. Don't make any covenant or agreement religiously entangling the Israelites with foreign people or with their gods. They shall not live in your land, because they will make you sin against me. For if you serve their gods, it will surely be a snare to you. Hold on one moment. Did we not just read in chapter 19 that Israel, when they are officially chosen to be the chosen people, they are chosen to be, and they are identified to be, a kingdom of priests. A kingdom, a nation that would represent God to other nations, right? And that would attract other nations to God. What God is saying, that you can only do that if you maintain your cultural integrity, if you maintain your religious solidarity, if you maintain the integrity of your God-given land along with very secure borders. Now, I'm not trying to make this into a culturally relevant message. It's just that the Bible is culturally relevant. I can't help it. So the only way to represent God as the chosen people, as to be what God called the nation of Israel to be, was to protect the integrity of the next generations to come. Not by intermingling and saying, hey man, we're all one big melting pot, or we're all one big mulligan stew, or whatever. Because invariably, the other cultures, the other nations will affect you. You will not affect them. They will affect you. You won't bring them up. They will bring you down. Now I'm talking about Israel. I'm not speaking of the United States. I'm not speaking of our situation. We are e pluribus unum. We are different. And God is not our king in America. But nonetheless, it's very clear that if you intermingle with the people, if you allow them to remain, make treaties with them, intermarry with them, God forbid, share your worship services with them, start to syncretize your worship, your religion, you'll descend to their level and without bringing them up to your level. Well, after the conquest that we see in Joshua, what book do we arrive at? We spent a very large portion of time in 2016 in the book of Judges. And that's exactly what we saw. Do you remember Judges, that cycle of doom? That's what we see is actually going to happen if you read ahead. But don't read ahead. Let's just stay where we are. And then God said to Moses, "Come up to the Lord." Moses said again, I am 80 years old, remember. Come up, but not just you. I want you to bring the whole mishpucha. Not the whole family. Bring Aaron, your brother, going to be the high priest, not high priest yet, and his children, his sons, Nadab and Abihu. And bring 70 of the elders of Israel. Bring the biggest muckamucks of Israel, right? Bring the representative leadership of the people to Sinai. And you shall worship. Worship whom? Worship me, God, Jehovah, at a distance. Right? Moses alone, however, shall come near to the Lord. But they, Aaron, your nephews, Aaron's sons, eldest sons, shall not come near to the Lord, or shall come near to the Lord. You come near, but they shall not come near. Nor shall the people come up with him. So here's how it's going to go. The people of Israel near to Sinai, but not touching it. 70 elders, plus Moses, plus Aaron, plus Moses' 2 nephews, or the 2 oldest nephews, Aaron's 2 oldest children. You will come up on to Sinai, not all the way up, somewhere up on the middle of the mountain, let's just say. Moses, you're the only one who gets to ascend to the peak to come and speak directly to me. It's the holiest, again, it's an ascending level of holiness. Why can't the people touch the base of the mountain? Because it's holy ground, because God's presence is on the mountain. Right? But the leadership are allowed to come not just close to the mountain, but actually on the mountain, but not up. Again, they get to ascend to the next holy level, next holiest level, but only Moses will get to ascend to the holiest level. He is the solely divinely sanctioned mediator of his people, and therefore only he can ascend into the very midst of the presence of God. Remember Nadab and Abihu, one of them would have succeeded Aaron as high priest, but both brothers were killed soon thereafter, subsequent to offering unauthorized fire on the altar. That story is found in Leviticus 10, a couple verses. Then Moses came and recounted to the people all the words of the Lord and all the ordinances. That's what we read in the chapters that we skipped. The end of 20, 21, 22, first half of 23. All the people answered with one voice. Now, we've heard the people answer the same response before. They answered with one voice, and they said, all the words which the Lord has spoken, we will do. Israel agrees. It's a verbal agreement to submit to the Mosaic covenant, to the Sinai covenant. All. Should have read the fine print. But all, not some, not most, look at what they're committing themselves to. All the words which the Lord has spoken, we will do. That was their response when Moses told them that they were going to be receiving laws from God. Before they hear them, chapter 19, they say, all the words, and now they say it again. All the words the Lord has spoken, we will do. And now it's time for the ratification of the covenant, an affirmation, if you will, of this covenant. Moses wrote down all the words of the Lord. Now, actually, that's worth pausing at. Moses wrote down all the words of the Lord. This is the first step in a flurry of covenant ratification activity that Moses springs into action to accomplish. He wrote down the words of the Lord. How many words of the Lord did Moses write down? All. And yet, we are told by our Orthodox Jewish brothers and sisters that there was a whole nother set of laws that God gave Moses orally. Moses only wrote down some of the commandments that he received directly from God. The rest, he listened really hard, and he transmitted them to Joshua and to Aaron and to the leadership of Israel. But I hear that. I understand. That's what the Mishnah, the Talmud, the oral laws are, right? We see the oral law in full effect by the time we get to the Gospels of the New Testament. But I read this verse, and I just can't get past that word all. Moses wrote down all the words of the Lord. I read that and I say, what part of all doesn't really mean all? What part of wrote down should be translated as wrote and retained orally and passed it down to next generation? None. But nonetheless, I digress. Then Moses arose early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain with 12 pillars, each pillar for representing one of the tribes of Israel. He sent young men of the sons of Israel, and they offered burnt offerings and sacrificed young bulls as peace offerings to the Lord. Two different kinds of offerings. You see that? Burnt offerings. What is a burnt offering? There's two major different kinds of, there are multiple different kinds of offerings in Leviticus, but these are the two major kind. Burnt offerings, burnt offering olah, means it is just for the Lord. It's burnt, and it's ascending up to the Lord. It's just for him to enjoy. And then peace offerings. These are offerings that are for the Lord, but not for his exclusive use. Can be enjoyed after being sacrificed, can be enjoyed by the people. With a festival meal. So, burnt offerings, peace offerings to the Lord. Moses took half of the blood and put it in basins. The other half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar. May I have someone alert the education wing that will be taking communion in a few minutes. The other half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar. And then he took the book of the covenant, it's the laws of God, the ordinance of God, and he read it in the hearing of the people. By now this should be familiar to us, their response. And they said, all that the Lord has spoken, we will do. And this time they add a codicil. And we will be obedient. In case we're not sufficiently clear, Moses and the Lord, to whom we're speaking indirectly because Moses is our intercessor, all that the Lord has spoken, all that Jehovah has spoken, our covenant God has spoken, we will do. And we will be obedient. So Moses took the blood and sprinkled it Why did he retain half the blood? Right? So that he could sprinkle the other half, not just on the altar, but on the people himself. So he takes the blood that's remaining and he sprinkles it on the nation of Israel. And he says, behold, the blood of the covenant, which the Lord has made with you in accordance with these words. The most solemn of covenants is ratified by blood. That's how we know it's the most solemn of covenants. There's only one covenant in the entirety of the Scripture that has this ceremony. Okay? We have the Abrahamic covenant. There's blood there in the Abrahamic covenant, but Abraham sacrificed the animals and then had nothing else to do with it. God put him into a sleep, and God passed through the pieces. This is a blood covenant that the people themselves of Israel are committing themselves to. Two parties here. Conditional covenant. The blood of the covenant. Behold, which Jehovah has made with you in accordance with these words.